Thank you. Thank you for coming. You heard from Hal Stanley briefly. His story, if it could be told, I don't know how long it would take. But in June of last year, I got a message from my office that Hal Stanley had called, and he said that he got my name from Senator Alan Clark. So I called Alan to find out what he was about to get me into. He said, Joe, this man is not guilty of what they've said he is. He and his wife are facing a ton, turned out to be 21, a ton of true findings of child abuse and neglect, and they're not true. He said the people in power don't care. And he said, they're going to, I'm sorry, this isn't even the saddest part. He said, they're going to represent themselves. And he said, I think that's a bad idea. David Schweitzer, judge from Garland County, he says, I wouldn't go to court without a lawyer, and I am one. So I agreed. I said, that's a really bad idea. And I met Hal, and we decided to see what we could do. I knew a little bit about the Child Maltreatment Act and how DHS worked. But I didn't know at that time that my whole life was about to change. Things impact you sometimes, and you can't get over it. And one of those things is oppression of your people. Molly Tierney was the director, and she may be again, of Baltimore Child Protective Services. She figured it out, that what they're doing is not a way to fix the problem. And she said oppression, if you haven't seen the 10-minute TED Talk from Molly, you need to look that up. Google it, Molly Tierney TED Talk. Oppression is a word, she says, that's usually reserved for use by the good people to describe bad people doing bad things. Only it turns out oppression is a tricky devil. It gets good people to unwittingly pick up its weapons and use them in the name of helping when we have the best intentions in our hearts. And if you don't believe it's oppression, the socially supported systematic mistreatment of a group, that's oppression. That's what DHS does, whether they intend to do it or not. The culture that has been created within our government is oppression. And we know who they pick on, and we know why they pick on them. It's right in front of us every single day. The problem is we needs to get bigger. Okay, we needs to be more than the sum of the victims. And right now, we're the victims. Okay, we needs to include people like Alan Clark that will tell the truth. That's why he's in trouble. That's why he's not chairing the JPR right now. You know, they can say rules and seniority all they want to, and that's fine. But, you know, and I know that they didn't want him chairing that. We like to use fancy words as lawyers. Our friend Doc has used one recently. Res ipsa loquitur. It means it speaks for itself. Okay? This government's actions speaks for itself. My favorite lawyer speak is but for. Not just because it has the word but in it. But you take that phrase and you put that in front of a person or an act, and you're directing responsibility, but for. In Texas, we used to say, if it wasn't for, okay? When I grew up, it was, well, if it wasn't for Joe doing, you know, fill in the blank, pretty much anything. It's directing that responsibility. Some but-fors aren't as easy as others. In law school, they used a case called Palsgraf. Mrs. Palsgraf slipped on a banana peel on a train platform, and her rear end smacked a board that shook a scale at the end of the train platform that fell over on something or something. Okay, so it's hard to say, but for that happening, the end result wouldn't happen. Today's but for it is really simple. But for Alan Clark and the Joint Professional Review Committee of the 2015 session, it would be business as usual in our government and Child Protective Services, because things that that committee and that man uncovered would still be in the bottom of the swamp. The guy's got the sign, drain the swamp. That's what Alan was trying to do, and that's why they stopped him. Alan did his own investigation of the Stanley family. He did the work the agencies refused to do. He saw the truth. He went to the agencies and he said, hey, these people are not guilty of this. You've got to figure out where we've gone wrong and start doing it right. They said, look, it's just the system. You know, that's the way it is. It fell on deaf ears. That's what started the JPR. But they also told him, if you only knew the whole story, if you only knew everything, you'd understand. You'd see it. And he said, tell me the whole story. They couldn't tell him the whole story because they already had told him the whole story. And he was right. This family was not guilty of what they had been found guilty of. But that didn't bother him either. They do not care. They operate in secret, out of sight, out of mind. Closed courtrooms, sealed records. They exclude family from the proceedings. They exclude family from the lives of the children. Even when a legislative committee sought information, they say, I'm sorry, I can't answer questions. We can't talk about a specific case. And thus far, they've been allowed to do that. An oversight committee, a legislative body investigating them, they can say, I can't talk about that. The JPR took care of business while they were in there. They didn't let the government bully them. The JPR is the kind of government we need. When we've got a problem, we say, look, there's the problem. We've got the government, Asa Hutchinson, and the Department of Human Services, and all of the new directors, Cindy Gillespie and Misha Martin, and their lawyers, David Sterling, saying, look, it's not that bad. These are extreme cases. We're making changes. Okay? Well, really, let's just look at the corruption within DHS alone that's telling us it's not that bad. We're making changes. Steve Jones, Deputy Director of Department of Human Services, was bribed by Ted Sewell. Okay? We have people within DHS stealing the children's summer lunch money. We've got a state. There's only 2 states with hungrier kids in it than Arkansas, and our people in DHS are stealing the lunch money for the kids. $125 million, that's really more like $150 million, squandered in a defunct software program within DHS. Now, that's not DCFS, but it's the same Cindy Gillespie. Okay? In Orange County, California, we still have lawyers, government lawyers, arguing that to federal judges that government agents should be immune from liability even if it has been proven that they have fabricated evidence and falsified records and committed perjury to support the removal of children from their families. Lawyers are saying they ought to be immune from it. They're saying it right now today to federal judges, that this is the way it ought to be. Since July of 2015, the Joint Professional Review Committee uncovered evidence that representatives of the executive agencies have lied, committed perjury, removed children that should not have been removed from families, and failed to remove some that should have been. Hornby Zeller said the same thing without the accusations of the perjury. But DHS and Asa Hutchinson discount that report because of the word potentially. Asa says, well, they said potentially 300 children were removed from families. What's that worth? Well, it's worth $5 million for the state to pay this company to give DHS their opinion so that it can be ignored if they don't like it. The problem is all of the evidence points to that. All of the evidence that we've been trying to bring forward, the families, all of the evidence that the JPR has uncovered. And I'm telling you, it wasn't easy. They're like greasy pigs. You can't catch them. You can't nail them down. They're not going to give it to you. Allen says if you don't know the right questions to ask, you're not going to find out anything. Okay? That's our government. That's the people we're dealing with. That's the people that stood by and let the JPR go by the wayside. Senator Clark uses words like Constitution and God and Jesus, and words like cover-up and perjury. Okay, those kind of words can be really offensive to the good old boy atmosphere when you're talking to the good old boys. Okay, the JPR discovered official correspondence within the agencies that was unlawfully withheld, despite legitimate demands. Okay, here's one of them. An email from the day after Hal Stanley's kids were taken from a supervisor. And I'll just read one little excerpt. This is what our government told Alan Clark he couldn't say. And the reason they said you can't put any of this email out is because the kids have to be protected. Okay? Res ipsa loquitur. It speaks for itself. These people are filling our heads full of garbage. And if you believe it, you need to come see me. We'll set up some counseling or something, okay? Here's the email. Upon staffing, this case feels like the ultimate violation of a family's freedom to live their own culture. We are continually getting classes and training to understand how culture impacts these decisions. It is apparent to me that this family has its own unique culture. They homeschool. They don't believe in modern medicine. They use a legal vitamin to try and keep the children healthy. And from all accounts, it appeared that the children were very healthy. From reports, the search warrant didn't find anything that would constitute the children being severely maltreated. It appears to me that the only thing this family has done is not conform to modern society and how certain government officials feel they should be living. That's DHS the day after they took this man's kids. It was 6 months later before he was able to start trying to put back the pieces of what's left of his family. Still hadn't done that. Okay? He's not going to give up. But that's the government doing this. They knew it the day after. Did they do anything? No. 21 months later, the Arkansas State Police still wants him on the maltreatment registry, even though his 16-year-old daughter is in college. Yes, he says, we do want him on the registry. Okay? He didn't even know they were on the registry. That's the problem. One of the problems. The JPR discovered that parents are charged and convicted of abuse and neglect where there was no evidence to support it. They uncovered evidence that the agency's own protocols and policies are ignored routinely and without repercussion whatsoever. The agencies and their boss, ASA, because let's get right down to it, executive agencies, they serve at his pleasure. This is his responsibility, okay? They want you to believe these are extreme cases, but they're not extreme cases, okay? They're every single day these cases are happening. Every single one of these things happened to that man in one case, and they knew it the day after. People are lying, they're falsifying, they're fabricating records, they're violating civil rights, and this is a standard operating procedure in some areas. Nationwide, everybody that's been run over by this train, they know it. You know it. You know somebody that knows it. You're being run over right now. They can deny it all day long. But it's a culture of persecution and oppression. We know who they're picking on. We know why they're picking on us. The JPR discovered that family members were being ignored and discriminated against in favor of foster and adoptive families. The JPR discovered that some judges are issuing orders contrary to the law and creating local rules or customs that do not promote equality and fairness. Senator Clark also said these things were all discovered despite the fact that the actors knew we were watching them. They're being investigated by a legislative body. They're under scrutiny. They know it, and they're still doing this. Imagine what they're doing in secret, which is where they normally operate and which is where they like to operate. That's scary. The JPR confirmed conflicts of interest in the administrative office of the courts. That's the big building right on the other side over here, the Supreme Court. The issue is fleshed out even though a special subcommittee of the Supreme Court and a Supreme Court Justice, Rhonda Wood, was testifying before the judiciary that there is no conflict. Okay? We're way beyond that now. There's a conflict. Everybody knows there's a conflict. The question that remains is why the AOC took the position that they took. Why are they trying to protect that turf, as Senator Clark puts it? There's no other reason other than to maintain control of parent counsel. Okay? Parent counsel is who represents you or who's supposed to represent you, but their boss is the same person that represents the judges and the ad litems and CASA, and it's a conflict. It's a bare naked conflict. Why do they want to maintain control? Well, it speaks for itself. These are unpopular things to say when you're part of the government. The issue of the conflict was the issue that has caused Senator Clark to accuse people within the administration of perjury, one person in particular. These are strong words for somebody in the government to use against the government. It takes courage to do that. I think it probably takes more courage, either courage or something, for some of these legislators, and especially a Supreme Court justice, to stand there and look us in the eye and say there's no conflict when there is a conflict. That's brave, too, but that's not the kind of brave that gets the bad actors on you. The kind of brave that gets the bad actors on you is the kind of brave that Senator Clark does when he says, no, that's perjury. And you're violating the law, and you're violating the constitutional rights of the people, and you're hurting families. Okay, that's what he's been saying. And that's the truth. The JPR has shown the Arkansas State Police Crimes Against Children Division for what it is and for how they operate. Who is responsible? Well, the directors are certainly responsible. The directors of these agencies that are violating civil rights and failing to put policy into place that can protect families. But ultimately, it's like the police chief over in Crittenden County said, Chief Oaks. Eventually, it gets to the governor, and he's responsible. Somebody needs to fix it. But what does the governor do? He sends out and asks for studies. We've had 3 of them now. He gives them more money. I haven't seen one substantive change in law or policy that has made any meaningful difference. A decrease in questionable removals, a meaningful increase in relative placement, a decrease in overturned true findings, an acknowledgement of the constitutional limitations that these people have, or an acknowledgement of their duty to respect the rights of the family. Not one of those things has been accomplished by anything that this governor has done or said. It's bad enough that they haven't done anything, but what's worse is to blatantly stand in the way of the people that are trying to do it. And that was this Joint Professional Review Committee and Alan Clark. They were trying to bring it to the top, trying to do something about it. And again, not preserving the JPR as it was so that it could continue on this work. That's the man giving us the finger. That's the man telling us that we aren't the power behind the government. That's the man telling us you're the property of the government. And they're doing it right in our face. That's the man showing that they'll sacrifice and ostracize a duly elected senator with heart and talent and loyalty to a fault for simply speaking the truth and doing his dead level best, to live up to that oath that he took. They'll sacrifice him in a minute. They've already done it. I've used Alan Clark and JPR interchangeably, more or less. But there were 29 members on this committee, as it was in the 2015 session. Some more active than others, of course. Chaired. Got it that time. Chaired by Alan Clark and Kim Hammer. Here are the senators: Alan Clark, Jane English, Micah Neal, Linda Collins Smith, John Cooper, Jeremy Hutchinson, Missy Irving, Brian King, Terry Rice, David Sanders, Gary Stubblefield. The representatives: Kim Hammer, Scott Baltz, Jana De La Rosa, Lance Eads, Kenneth Ferguson, Charlene Fite, Mickey Gates, Michelle Gray, Prissy Hickerson, Josh Miller, Milton Nix, Chris Ritchie, Dan Sullivan, Dwight Tosh, Clark Tucker, John Walker. John Walker, he can tell you something about oppression. He's the gentleman that was just arrested by the Pulaski County Police Department for videotaping the oppression of another black man. Just turns out that he's a representative and was on this committee, and he's a civil rights lawyer. Dave Wallace, David Whitaker, and Richard Womack. That committee's no more now. Missy Irvin is going to be the chair, and we'll see where they go. The positive message is that they worked hard for you. I watched it. You watched it. The governor watched it. That's the kind of government that we need. That's the kind of government that we need to support. Yeah, that'd be nice. I'd get on board that one. Here's the problem. I know a lot of you personally. We worked together against this. Here's your but for that really matters. But for Alan Clark, or but for the Joint Performance Review Committee, there are some of you out there that would not have your children at home right now. Okay? Their involvement, their refusal to give up, you got your kids home. Here's the problem with that. It shouldn't take an act of Congress for a father and mother to be able to raise their own children without interference from the government. It shouldn't take an act of Congress. This is a no-brainer. This speaks for itself. But for the JPR, some of you would not have your kids. Think about that. It wasn't seniority. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't even passive aggressiveness that allowed this committee to slip away. Those that allowed it to happen should be held responsible. It was planned, active participation behind the scenes. I promise you, it was obstruction of justice, because justice is what this committee was seeking. I didn't intend to preach any gospel, but I just might a little bit. Luke 11:52, woe unto you lawyers, for ye have taken away the key of knowledge. That's the key of knowledge. It's not that difficult. Ye entered in not yourselves, but those that were entering in ye hindered. So again, these people can tell you it was rules and it was seniority. That's bull. They hindered progress. They hindered the search for truth. They hindered the search for justice by allowing this committee to slip away. And another real quick scripture. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper. Every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. It's Isaiah 54:17. Is this government serving the people? Are the people serving the Lord? Not when you've taken away the key. The key. The key says honor your father and mother. Little children cannot honor their father and mother in a DHS case. It's not possible. The rules and the customs and the policies prohibit honoring the father and mother. He says, children, obey your parents. You can't obey your parents in a DHS case. Not when you might get an hour a week supervised visitation with your parents. You can't do it. DHS, the state police, Children's Hospital, judges, and other stakeholders have been violating our constitutional rights at will, and it's got to stop. Here's a couple of headlines over the last 30 days of this great department with new people that are changing, okay? November 17th, this is Thursday. Arkansas State Arkansas police chief says DHS failed to respond to an abandoned baby report. Chief Oakes from Crittenden County couldn't get anyone in the whole county of DHS on the phone for 2.5 hours. He had to place the baby himself with the grandmother. November 7th, child abuse investigator accused of fabricating reports. The Arkansas State Police Crimes Against Children Division investigator Whitney Adams was arrested October 27th for tampering with records. She is accused of fabricating reports in at least 43 cases over the last 18 months. That's our state police crimes against children. Okay. November 1st, Ted Sewell, former operator of a Medicaid-financed mental health services empire, was sentenced to 7 years in prison, 3 years to supervised release, and a $200,000 fine for bribing former deputy director of DHS, Stephen Jones. Jones oversaw the Medicaid reimbursements that funded Sewell's business. Also November 1st, Hutchinson administration resists accountability in child rape case, which gets us to October 25th story. Clarence Garrettson, a Van Buren, Arkansas long-haul trucker, foster parent, adoptive parent, and serial child rapist, has had 35 children placed in his home by DCFS. This even prompted Max Brantley to call for a legislative investigation, right? Here's what Max said. Time for a legislative investigation. If the parents in an adoptive home are accused of sexual assault and the home is closed as a foster home, can it remain an adoptive home? How serious was the investigation into the allegations of abuse against Garrettson in 2004? We need to know whether people in that chain of command are in command now. It's simply wrong for a state agency to hide behind a shield of confidentiality meant to protect children when exactly the opposite result occurred. Governor Hutchinson and a question mark. That's Max Brantley. What the heck happened here? Okay, that sounds like Alan Clark. You know, Max likes to skewer Alan for his positions, but this is what Alan's been saying all along. You know, well, welcome to the party, Max. Come on in. The water's fine. You know, I wish he had known that when we were trying to subpoena Judge James that we were in the middle of a legislative investigation, investigating this very same thing. But like I said, it's okay. Better late than never. Come on, Max. November 8th, an Orange County jury. This is one that's not local, but it's one that these people need to read. Orange County, this is the West Coast, left coast California, Orange County, not New York, found that the County Department of Children and Family Services had, quote, an official custom and or practice of seizing children from their parents without a warrant, end quote, and failed, quote, to enact official policy or procedure when it should have done so, end quote. The plaintiff, Miss Duval, was awarded $3 million in compensatory damages for DHS's warrantless seizure of her son and interference with the right to familial association. In other words, what they do here every day, okay, just hit Orange County for another $3 million. I hope it's not a kind of a Ford Firestone rollover analysis being done by DHS going, we can pay a few of those over the next 10 years, and it's worth it financially to keep taking these children. I hope it's not as dastardly as that. But the bottom line is we've got to get back to the Constitution and the laws that really matter. These laws that they're hiding behind are not constitutional. We've got to get back to basics. It's really not that difficult. At the end of the day, the question is this a government of the people? Would a government of the people violate its people's rights? And if they do, by necessity, is it not violating its own? So is that even possible? I don't know. Would a government of the people punish an elected official for acting honorably? Honorable leaders and committees like the JPR are the minority. They are now the targets, but they're the future if we have a chance. Again, we know what the government's doing. The problem is we's got to get bigger than just the victims. The sum of the victims of the we is not enough. You've got to tell people. We've got to keep people that will tell the truth, like Alan Clark, in powers or in positions of enough power so that he continue to do what he's doing. You heard the 29 members. All of them aren't doing the type of work that Alan's doing. We'll see how the new chair of the Senate does, but I know Alan Clark and Kim Hammer and Linda Collins Smith and Mickey Gates and Dwight Tosh and Gary Stubblefield and even Stephanie Flowers who is not a member of this committee, knows the problems and is fighting and is trying to help. There were actually a lot of legislators not members of the JPR. Saw them in there a lot. 28 times they met. 14 of those times was spent on DHS, State Police, Administrative Office of the Courts. I think this committee's done more work, or it did, in the last session on DHS and exposing the truth than any other government body that I've ever seen. I know I've heard more truth from the people that are in it. The problem is, when our government doesn't support an official like Alan Clark that's telling the truth, and then they take steps so that he is not in a position of power to continue the good work that he was doing, it's time that we hold those people accountable. And you're coming out here today on a Saturday. I should be hanging in a tree somewhere waiting for one of God's creatures to feed my family, but I'm not. I would be here every single day as long as I was able to come if I thought it was going to help. And I do think this is going to help. I think we're going to get their attention. I know how hard it is to get 10 people together. I was in a rock band. Worked my way through college. We had 8 people in the crowd. We had a great gig, even if I knew all 8 of them. This is simple. This is government abuse of its people and government abuse of people that we have elected and sent up here to do our bidding, because it's not what they want. And it's got to stop. It's res ipsa loquitur, isn't it, Doc? It speaks for itself. And thank you, and God bless you for being here. And we'll see you next time. We'll do another one.